I spent $200,000 on my MBA, and today I'll be breaking down everything from my application strategy to how I got my full time offer at RBC to what it was really like attending the MBA program. So, without further ado, let's dive in. So, when I was first applying to business school, it was really confusing for me to figure out where should I go to business school, how should I write my essays, and how I should even apply. I mean, there was a lot of information that was all over the internet. Some of it was on Reddit, some of it was on GMAT Club, and some of it was on like random MBA blogs. So when I got started, I basically decided to make a framework to kind of structure my application process before I move forward with just my essays and even writing any of my resumes. So the first thing I did was basically check out my career and see how my career was moving 5 or 10 years down the line. Before my MBA, I was working as a data analyst at the Bank of Montreal, mostly in the tech side of things. And I wanted to pursue my MBA and go to business school to get a sense of kind of like the business side of things and learn a little bit more about how I could use my experience in data analytics to craft strategies for banks. And at the time, the role that kind of aligned with what I had done in the past was consulting. So I decided to pick my short term goal as consulting. To decide which schools were the best fit for this short term goal, I basically made a list of 3 targets, 3 reaches, and 3 safeties in the area where I wanted to recruit. At the time, I knew I wanted to do my MBA from a name brand school, and I knew I wanted to live in New York in the future. So I basically looked at schools in and around the city and kind of applied to those schools that kind of made sense with my short term goal. In terms of stats, I looked at the average GPA of the cohort and also the average GRE and GMAT score and got a sense of where I would fit in or whether or not they would even take me or reject me based off of my stats alone. When it came to the essay, I think this is something that a lot of applicants struggle with a lot, myself included. I knew that I wanted to kind of give a sense of what my short and long term goals are. When it comes to kind of just telling your story, not a lot of adcoms want to hear where you came from and why. I think a personal story is great, but it just needs to be the hook of your essay. So, my hook and my personal story was basically about my love for storytelling and also my experience working in data analytics at the Bank of Montreal. And I tied that to my personal experience, which was basically my love for Nancy Drew novels growing up as a kid. So, that kind of hooked the adcom into reading the rest of my essay and kind of dove into what I wanted to do at business school and what I wanted to do long term in terms of my career. So, in terms of my personal story, I only kept it to about 2 to 3 lines to a paragraph max. And it was basically a lead in to my short term goals, which was to break into consulting. In terms of my long term goals, I just took my short term goals and stretched them over where I saw myself 10 years down the line. And basically, I knew in 10 years I wanted to be able to start my own consulting firm. And I have. I do help out MBA applicants to break into their dream schools through my firm, Athena Consulting. So if you're interested in essay writing services or interview prep, you can contact me below through my website at theathenaconsulting.com. When it came time to sort of tie in my extracurriculars and my leadership activities and everything I had done outside of work, I essentially looked at the culture of the school that I was applying to. So, say I was applying to NYU Stern, which emphasizes a lot on EQ and IQ. I basically tailored my extracurriculars to fit the culture of the school that I was applying to. Cornell focused a lot on community, so I spoke about my experience being a lead of a spring fundraiser for the Food Banks Canada and how I was able to make an impact on the community, and also how my long term goals would help out the community as a whole and why I needed to go to Cornell to do that. I think that is a major tie in to your extracurriculars when you're writing your essays. And then when it came to my interviews, I knew that I wanted to leave nothing to chance. I basically looked at all of the past year questions that had come for a specific school and outlined them in a Word document and prepared my answers for those questions and sort of practiced them in the mirror a couple of times. But I think a lot of applicants, and myself included, think that memorizing the questions and kind of being able to answer them on command is the best way to give an interview. The one thing that I want to mention is that if you have an interview invite, it's because the school sees potential in you. They're not trying to reject you just because they gave gave you an interview invite. So I would really recommend trying to also bring a little bit of your personality to kind of get an understanding of who you are as a person outside of work. How would you actually fit in with their class when it comes to just basically outside of your application? Who are you as a person? Now, basically speaking about my experience in business school and what it was actually like, I think people like to think that getting into business school is the hardest part. Like once you get in, it's all done, you're all okay, and you'll definitely be able to get a job offer. That isn't the case, especially now. When I was going through the entire application process and also going through business school, I think recruiting in general was the most difficult aspect for me. It was extremely tough to be able to get a job offer, especially as an international student. I'd gone in initially with the idea that I'd be recruiting for consulting, and then midway through the recruitment process, I thought that I could crack into investment banking. I have a background in electrical engineering, and I thought, hey, how hard could it be? So I decided to essentially break into investment banking with no finance experience, no formal education in finance, and no formal degree either, like a CFA or a CPA. And basically, I essentially spent most of the first months of business school from August to December just trying to teach myself the basics of accounting, the basics of valuation principles, the 400 questions guide, and essentially teaching myself all of that from scratch. And I was very lucky that I was actually able to land a couple of super days despite not having any formal education in finance and actually being able to sit for those interviews. Now, going through the recruitment process as an international student who had no formal finance education before coming to business school was definitely a major hurdle for me. But I learned a couple of things throughout the investment banking recruiting process. The first thing, if you don't have a CFA or a CPA, the process will definitely be harder for you to sort of crack and kind of get an offer. At the end of the day, recruitment is a competition. And if you're a bank and you have to choose between an applicant who has a CFA or a CPA versus one who just doesn't, you're probably going to pick the guy who does have a CFA or a CPA. Second thing I want to say is that there are some banks who just kind of did not recruit international students at all. And they kind of wanted their applicants to fit a certain mold or a certain look of applicant. And you could tell that by who they invited back to coffee chats or networking events and other people who were kind of excluded from those opportunities. I think if you're someone who's watching this and you're trying to fit that mold for a specific job or a friend group or even a network that doesn't really accept you, it's okay. There will be opportunities that will be aligned for you that make more sense and are a much more natural fit for you. I think it's better to walk into a bank or a job or any sort of, experience with your head held high rather than to sacrifice your self-respect for a career. Another thing is that a lot of jobs like investment banking or consulting are looking for applicants who already have prior experience in that field. So basically, they're not really looking for somebody that they can coach or train from day one. They just need you to start working as quickly as possible. So if you're someone who's trying to break into investment banking or consulting, I would highly recommend looking into pre MBA internships or even MBA conferences where you can get an internship offer beforehand and then start working in that field that you want to be a part of as quickly as possible. And finally, on a more personal note, I think that, just because a career is high paying and prestigious doesn't essentially mean that it is the right career for you. I think that this isn't really talked about in MBA circles, especially when every person is gunning for MBB or Goldman or whatever. They're so obsessed with prestige and the idea of having so much money and having that shiny life that they forget how internally taxing and mentally difficult it is to maintain that lifestyle and perform mostly for everybody else and also kind of for themselves, I guess. That's something that I learned throughout the process that made me realize that I didn't really feel like working those 80 to 100-hour weeks. When I got my job at the tail end of recruiting, especially when I had completed the investment banking recruiting process, I was incredibly burnt out. I decided to apply to RBC for my internship position in February, and I was kind of able to experience the city during the summer, get closer to my family, get closer to my parents, and I felt a lot less burnt out than my other classmates who had continuously worked 80 to 100-hour weeks for their entire internship and didn't really leave the office that much. Now, I understand that everyone kind of has their own personal journey when it comes to their career, but this was just my experience when it comes to these prestigious and kind of high paying jobs. Now, considering sort of like the social aspect of business school, I think this is something that I've spoken about a lot in my previous videos as well. Before I had joined business school, I'd kind of seen it as like a 2 year vacation that everybody talks about, but that really wasn't the case. I felt that I was constantly recruiting, constantly working hard towards either academics or kind of being there on all the time for networking or mixers or anything. And I always felt like I was sort of just performing for others and kind of dealing with these very transactional relationships constantly. An MBA is a very, very, very social program where you are with the same people 24/7. And when I mean 24/7, I mean they live in your building, you go to the gym with them, you will always see them on the street, you will see them everywhere. And yes, it sometimes it does result in a close-knit community, but my experience was more like it was high school but for 30-year-olds. And for some people that's okay. That is, they're very comfortable in that environment. I just wasn't one of those people. So, if you're going through business school, I think that this is a fairly common experience, that it's not really something that people think it's like just like college where it's a 2 year vacation and you get to make a bunch of friends and it's like awesome and it's clicky. It is very clicky, but if you are comfortable in that environment, you will thrive there. If you're not and you kind of want a more freer, more less group oriented environment, it is kind of difficult for you to find your tribe or find your people. And that can be a bit challenging when it comes to a whole social life. So, when I was working my internship at the wealth management department, I wanted to make sure that I was able to secure a full time offer, either in the current group that I was working at or basically in any other group at the bank under the wealth management department. And I would recommend this to anybody who's kind of going through their internships right now and is looking to secure a full time offer. I basically used the internal workday to be able to apply to as many jobs as I could that kind of fit my profile. So at least, at the very least, I would walk out with a full time offer, or I would be able to build a network of hiring managers who would be willing to hire me after graduation. And I think this kind of worked because I was able to get my full time offer. But when I went back to the US, I still made sure to keep recruiting as well. Like, I remember I applied to all kinds of roles, like anything that would take me. Basically, I even recruited for consulting as well, also recruited for finance again. And I was able to kind of get a final round interview at Microsoft as well. And, at the end of it, it was a great learning experience for me, but it was definitely a lot of work when it comes to the recruitment process. So if you're in the MBA program right now, or you're just applying to business school, I would make sure to take that recruitment process very seriously, because the rest of business school just becomes a lot easier when you already have a job offer in hand. So, after graduation, I'm happy to announce that I have a full time offer at RBC in the wealth management department, and I will be joining them as a manager in the business risk department. And also, I'm happy to announce that I've launched my own MBA consulting firm called Athena Consulting. I've helped a lot of applicants break into their dream business school, whether it's through interview prep or interview coaching, career coaching for investment banking or consulting, or helping them craft their essays so that they could get into their dream business school. So if you're interested in working with me, please check out my website. I've put it in the description below. And if you have any questions or comments about, my business school journey or what it was like getting a full-time offer in Canada, please put those questions below in the comments. And if you like this video and you like all of my previous videos, please consider liking and subscribing to my channel. And as always, I will see you in the next one. Bye.